If you're a true Nolan fan, you know his feature debut was following, and that before that he made a short film called Doodlebug. But did you know there are at least 2 more films of his in existence? The first one is called Larceny, which Nolan made in the mid-90s. This short film was shown only once at the 1996 Cambridge Film Festival, where apparently it was very well regarded. But unfortunately no public copies of this one exist, and so it is now considered lost media. Which is also true for an even earlier movie that Nolan made as a teenager, somewhere between 1989 and 1990. This short film aired only once in 1990 and had been considered lost ever since. That is, until someone was able to uncover it 31 years later. Tarantula is actually the debut short film of Christopher Nolan, which means that it is the very first film, the very first thing he ever put out in public. He made it together with his friend Rocco Bellic and also stars in it himself together with his brother Jonathan Nolan. The film is only about 4 minutes long and is ostensibly about a man who suffers from a nightmare about a tarantula. What's probably most interesting here is just how experimental this one really is. Like, you can tell Nolan just shot this in his living room, or at least some convenient location that he had easy access to, but he's nevertheless able to invoke a kind of eerie, dreamy atmosphere out of these everyday sights and objects. We are then introduced to the main character, who is this guy who's just sleeping in his bed and clearly suffering from some kind of nightmare. He awakens in this kind of vampiric fashion and wanders into the living room, where he meets what seems like kind of a demon who's played by Christopher Nolan himself, by the way. And like, I won't argue that this is some kind of secret masterpiece, but it is really interesting to see how early on Nolan had such a strong command over various filmmaking techniques. Like the intercutting between shots to invoke a kind of internal state of the character, just the angles, the movements, the shot reverse shots, the intercutting with close-ups. It's all pretty sophisticated for a movie of this scope. We see the man sitting at the table with the demon, intercut with shots of the spider, and then we jump to an exterior location, which seems to be some kind of parking lot or bridge. I'm not sure exactly what it is. It kind of invokes this labyrinthian feel where the man gets lost further and further into the depths of his own nightmare, basically. And the movie then also becomes more abstract and impressionistic. There's a lot of close-up shots, a lot of abstractions that are more about kind of conveying a sort of texture or tactileness rather than conveying something narratively. We then cut back to the man still lying in his bed, as if suggesting that maybe he never got up at all, that this was all part of the dream world, before we then see him being devoured of sorts by some kind of strange creature or person. We zoom in on an eye one more time, and that's the end of it. And so yeah, all in all, it's pretty interesting to see how you can see some of Nolan's fascinations quite early on here, you know, his obsession with the subconscious mind and the kind of dream, the inner dream world of humanity. It's also all very visually driven. There's like no dialogue at all. It's just music, which already feels very Nolan-esque in a way. But what personally fascinated me the most about this was, again, to see just how experimental this was and how Nolan was more concerned with just capturing a kind of feeling, capturing a kind of abstract or subjective aspect of the human experience in a way that's not trying to quantify it or render it in logical terms, but rather in a way that is just trying to echo that feeling or that experience. Because honestly, I feel like this is often missing in a lot of short movies today. Like, I go through phases where I watch short films on YouTube, many of which are very well made from a production point of view. Like, I think people nowadays have a much better grasp of the basics of editing and lighting and so on, because there's just so many more resources that are available now. But at the same time, I also feel with a lot of these shorts that so many of them are just painfully straightforward on a narrative level and also painfully on the nose on that more thematic level. And so what I found so insightful about seeing Nolan's first short film is that he really wasn't afraid to play around with more obscure or abstract techniques that might come across as alienating or that it isn't very clear in what it's trying to do. But, and again, I'm not saying this is like a masterpiece of a short, I'd say, but it is one that evoked something within me. Like, it did give me a strong impression of a feeling. And so yeah, in that sense, it wasn't just like a fun gimmick to see Nolan's very first short film, but it was also actually quite inspirational. And it actually has me curious to see what a full-on Nolan horror movie would look like, but I don't know, maybe someday.